Are you ready to grow your financial practice to heights you've never imagined? You're listening to the Elevated Advisor Podcast with your online business mentor and host, David Scranton. Each week, you'll learn Dave's secrets that have helped him become one of the most successful financial advisors in the country. So are you ready to become an elevated advisor? The Elevated Advisor Podcast starts now.
And a great big welcome to this week's episode of the Elevated Advisor Podcast. I'm David Scranton, your host. And this week we have a very special guest. We have Ghabour from Lewis, Delaware. And he's going to talk to us a lot about the power of PR. And I know that you'll find his story to be nothing short of amazing. So, Eddie, as usual, great to spend some time with you here.
Thank you for having me, Dave. I really appreciate it.
Now, you and I have known each other how long now, would you guess?
It's been about 10 years, believe it or not. Time flies when you're having fun, right?
About 10 years? Okay. And when I first met you, how much production would you say you were bringing in terms of new business in a given year?
Probably maybe $10 to $12 million a year, if I had to make my best educated guess on that during that time period.
And how much did you bring in last year for new dollars to your firm?
So from a firm perspective, last year we did well over $100 million as a firm, closer to 150 as a firm of new assets that we brought in last year. So a lot of that's thanks to your coaching as well too. Over the years has made us a better company. Made myself a better advisor, and it's like anything, right? You work hard, you continue to stick to a process that's proven to work, and you'll get rewarded for it.
Yeah. And what was your number one lead generation source last year in 2022?
So it was actually the PR, the national PR that I do. I've done it for 8 years. It takes a lot of patience, and it's a grind. It's not easy, as you know. But again, I trusted the process and continued to stick with it, and it paid some nice dividends from the firm standpoint last year.
Yeah, and part of it too is you want to have balance, right? You're not one of these guys who's a workaholic who wants to work till 7 o'clock at night, work on weekends. You want to have balance. So tell us a little bit about your family life, some of the things that you do with your family, some of the coaching, because when people hear 150 million a year, they think, oh gosh, this guy's in the stratosphere. I can never be this guy. I never want to work that hard. And all these limiting beliefs come oozing out, right? But you work hard, but you also have good balance. So tell us about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dave, you know how important my family is to me. Everything else is a distant second. So I've got 2 teenage boys that are very active in sports. I never miss any of their sporting events. I don't miss any of their school functions. Our schedule and clients understand that. And I coach football. And last year, it was a big year for us, obviously, but I coached high school football last year. Mm-hmm. And anyone that's coached at the high school level knows how demanding that is. I mean, I was leaving the office 2:30 every day during football season, which starts in August. And if you're good enough, you're playing in the playoffs till November. And then, of course, I like to do experiences with our family and take trips at least a few times a year where we get this quality time because they grow up so fast. And now that my oldest is 2 years away from college, I'm really starting to feel the pressure. So I'm trying to do more and more because I know once he leaves and goes away, I won't get to see him nearly as much. So at the end of the day, I think when I look back over the last 25 years of doing this, if I'm being completely honest, the motivation at first was money, right? When I first got into the business, that was very intriguing to me. Mm-hmm. But the older I got, and with good coaching, again, I want to credit you for a lot of this as well, too, because I think everyone can get better with a coach. It kind of puts you back in the lane that you need to be in, because I think this business is very stressful. It's very demanding. And sometimes you can forget about the things that are more important in life. Because if I died with a net worth of $100 million, it wouldn't mean a damn thing if I didn't have a relationship with my family. That's right. Having that balance. And here's what's interesting. The more I have that balance, the better production we have as a firm. Don't ask me why that works, but it does. And maybe it's because of my team that I empower them to take on more responsibilities. and it motivates them to elevate their game as well too. So, because I think another limited belief is that you have to do everything as the advisor or owner of the firm, and I have learned that delegating, trusting, and verifying is very effective.
Yeah. No, you've got a great team there, and you're a great leader of your team. I know, pretty much, anybody would take a bullet for you in your office, and that's the environment you certainly want to have. And I noticed, though, the funny thing is that you mentioned college being 2 years away. Now, for some of you viewing or listening, you might think, oh my goodness, if this were you, you might be thinking, wow, I've got to work hard, I've got to make money, I've got to save for college, I've got to put my kids through college. Notice Eddie didn't say that, right? Eddie, you're more focused on not $150 million in this past year. You're not worried about how you're going to pay for college. You're more worried about, hey, how do I get these last couple of years of quality time in before my kids get to a point where they're too busy to spend time with me? Because at age 16, they're getting there, right? They're already getting there.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, these experiences you have with them, right? Everyone wants their children to be successful, and success doesn't necessarily mean, how much money they're going to earn. I tell my kids, no matter what you're going to do in life, I want to make sure you do it with the mindset of trying to be the best, and you try to influence them in a positive way. So that way, when they do go out on their own, hopefully they'll use the principles and think back to the things that we did.
Right.
It's funny. My son and I were talking about this the other day. If you remember, I was at a conference with you, and my son had a lacrosse championship game that happened to get scheduled during that conference.
Yep,
and
I remember.
My wife thought I was nuts, but I flew him he was with me at the conference because I brought my family with me. Flew him to the game, watched a championship game, and then right after that game, went right back to the airport and flew back to Florida to be, with the rest of my family and with you and everyone else that I was there for. Yeah. And looking back now, as tough as that was scheduling wise, he'll never forget that. And I'll frankly, selfishly never forget that. So and it just kind of shows, again, I think you have to, as a parent, you try to have the same work ethic you do when you're in the office. And that's hopefully something that I'm teaching my two boys.
Awesome. I love it. Well, you're a great dad. And, of course, I've never had the opportunity to be a father. But if I had, I would use you as a role model for sure.
Thank you.
It's funny. You mentioned before that it seems like the more you have balance in your life, the more money you make. And he said, I don't know why, it just seems to work out this way. Well, Eddie, I'm sure you've talked to people who are really philanthropic who said, well, every time I give more money away to charity, to a good cause, my net worth goes up, right? You've heard that before, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, in a left brain math world, it doesn't make any sense. I give money away, how come my net worth goes up? But it seems to work. Right? People who are very philanthropic have a higher net worth. And I think part of it's because you got to go through life with a philosophy of abundance, not a philosophy of scarcity, right? And so to have that balance in life, you've got to work hard. It doesn't work if you're not working hard when you're there, if you're not focused and working smart. But it's true that the more balance you have in your life, the more productive you feel, the more productive you are in the office, and therefore the more you make. And it might not make sense, again, in a left-brain mathematical world that, hey, I have more balance, I make more money. But, hey, we live in two hemispheres, not just a left-brain world, right? So I wanted to point out to our viewers, our listeners, that you made that point, and I think it's a good point.
Yeah, and look, the other thing, too, when I think about it, it's like when you know that I know I'm going to have to leave the office today at 2:30. So every literal minute of my day is accounted for. There's no just, kicking up with my feet up in the air. So you get in the office at 8 o'clock or 7:30. And then if you're out at 2:30, you're much more productive during that shorter period of time than you would if you're staying till 7, because it's like that saying, if you want something done right, give it to a busy person. Right. Because when you have extra time on your hands, you don't realize how much time you actually waste in a day. So I feel like I'm getting just as much work done in less amount of hours.
The day you get the most work done is the day before you go on vacation, because there's no such thing as tomorrow. You have to get it done now. So your whole life is like that. And it's good. And it's not like you're killing yourself. You're working at a measured pace and everything. But let's get back to the PR side, okay? Because that's what this is about here. And again, your major lead generation source last year that gave you most of your revenue is from PR. Now, you've been doing PR now for, 8 years or so?
Yeah, it's been 8 years.
And now you've built relationships. I know you have a great relationships with one of the anchors on Fox Business, right? So as a result, you've been on there on a regular basis, and because you're on there on a regular basis, people get used to seeing you, and because people get used to seeing you, people are calling you from all over the country wanting to throw money at you, and so I mean, it's not quite that easy, but it's kind of sort of what's happening, right?
Yeah, and it's like anything, right? It's just like when you're building a business. The first several years, you may not get the initial results that you want, but you got to have that goal at the end in mind with what you're building, because the PR, you're building your brand. The other thing that you are also building is your reputation. You know what I find interesting that I learned over the last 12 months is a lot of these folks that have invested with us, they've been watching me on Fox Business and other networks for years. And so, that's their vetting process. They want to see what your message is. They want to see if you're full of hot air, if you seem like a genuine person. And they want to make sure you're accurate too, right? When somebody's trusting you to manage their assets, they want to know what your philosophy is and if it's in line with them. So for someone that's going to start out doing PR, I would tell them that patience is key in regards to just sticking to it. Because again, it took me 7 years to really see any real results. And now the results are more than making up for lost time. And to your point, humbly say, I like to say we're continuing to build our brand as a company. And look, as an entrepreneur, if you ever want to sell your business one day too, that brand recognition allows you to get a better multiple on your company. Right. So it's not about getting those initial dollars and cents. It's looking at the big picture and building a brand.
Well, I know your theory too. You espouse the same theory that I do, that successful people don't do things to see if they'll work. They do things until they work. But for you, the gravitation toward PR was a natural, right? Because you worked in a previous life as an anchorman on the news, so you just had this natural affinity toward PR. Is that correct?
Couldn't be further from the truth. I tell you, the one thing with PR is you have to be coachable, right? Yeah. It's, I'll tell you, my very first interview, I remember like it was yesterday. My knees were shaking so bad that I gave an answer, and my family knew I was on TV for the first time, and they were sending me text messages. How did it go? And I told them, I don't know what the hell I said because I pretty much just blacked out. And that is a natural thing. And then you just get coached up, and you get coached, and I watch my videos even now over and over again, just to kind of make sure that I'm happy with the work that I put in. Just like as a football coach, I'll watch film. I'll watch a game film 3 or 4 times because you'll pick up something small every time. Right. And those X's and O's matter.
That's right. So then for a while you got demoted from television after that first experience, right? So you did radio for a while, which is good. It's how a lot of people cut their teeth doing radio. And now radio, you enjoyed the crap out of radio. That was the most fun experience for you, right?
Wrong again, Dave. Yeah. You look, radio, I've seen some folks do radio and they knock it out of the park. For me, I'm more of a, face-to-face, like to talk with my hands. When I'm on TV, I feel like I'm having that better interaction. So everyone is different. Best of both worlds would probably be to do both, but I didn't. I did gravitate more to the TV. I felt more comfortable with that, and just really focused on that and stuck with it. So but I was not one that did well on the radio side.
But you did the radio for a while, I remember, to cut your teeth because – it's always interesting. To me, it's always easier to learn when you take away that third dimension of video, because now while you're thinking of your answer, you could be looking down, you could be looking at notes, you could be looking sideways, you can scratching your forehead, whatever you do. Some people, when they think, they look up, right? So it takes away that dimension. So that was a great way to cut your teeth. But after a short period of time, you got good at that, even though I know you hated it, right? Got back to television and continued to work on it. But once again, when you got back to television, then do you just get to a certain level of success and rest on your laurels, or if not, tell us how you're constantly striving to get better? What does that look like? What do you do?
Yeah, and look, I do want to kind of also say that if I didn't do the radio, I don't think I would have been as successful on the TV. So you're right. As much as I didn't like it, it was amazing practice to be able to respond to questions and do things like that. But on the TV, look, the minute you take anything for granted will be the minute that you get humbled. It's just like the markets. The minute you think you have it all figured out, the markets will humble you. So, I try to not only study what my videos are, but these networks, you're a dime a dozen. The minute you think they need you more than they need me, that's you're going to be. They'll get rid of you. They don't need you.
That's right.
And so one of the things that I try to do a really good job of is when there's a news article of the day that's important, is I get my notes out to them immediately. Even if I'm in a client meeting and I see that a network wants my opinion on what the CPI index is, I'll tell the client, I'll say, listen, the network wants my opinion on CPI. If you don't mind, I'll be with you in about a couple of minutes. And sometimes I'll just type it right there while they're in the meeting with me, and they think it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I'm extremely responsive. And what I find is probably, if I'm guessing, is a lot of folks aren't as responsive as me. And that means if I get my notes out first, I have a better shot at getting on that network.
That's right.
And that's something that, again, I've been coached on, but I still, the minute I get those notes, like this morning, I was on and I was waiting and waiting for those notes at 7:03 is when it hit. And I just quickly responded. So it's a fast-paced business. The industry is fast. The news are fast. If you don't adapt and are fast with it, they don't have time for you.
And for those of you who don't know what he's talking about, of course, it all starts with a good PR person. And I know your PR person by the name of Pam. I know her. Of course, I know her personally too. And she's tough. She's tough on you, right? She's like the PR Nazi. Would that be a fair, the soup Nazi, the PR Nazi? Would that be a fair description?
Look, here, you know me, I'm a sports guy, right? So
Right.
when I coach people, I'm hard on them,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, I give them a hug and they know that I'm there and I'll do anything for them. So when Pam and I maybe butt heads over a few things, or she's on me because I didn't do something to her liking in a timely manner, or whatever that may be, I don't take it personal. We've never raised our voice at each other. I just look at it as, hey, this is a coach that's pushing me to be better. And it's worked. And not everybody's coachable, right? There's a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's some folks get their ego hurt or they take it personal. I tell my kids all the time, and I mean my kids, the kids that I coach, I say, look, the minute I stop riding your butt, that means I've given up on you. So if I'm still riding your butt, it's because I see a lot of potential, and my job is to get the best out of you as I possibly can. And that's how I look at the relationship with a PR person. If they're not pushing you and making you uncomfortable, then they're probably not doing their job.
Right. And that's how PR is pitched, right? I mean, there's a topic of the day, oftentimes some newsworthy topic that comes out. And, if you respond at 3 p.m, chances are the network's already chosen whoever they're going to want to have on. So you got to be the first one out with some summary that makes some sense, right? And, hopefully you'll get chosen. So you're right. By being coachable by her, it allowed you to, number one, respond to get those notes done more quickly, and also realize that sometimes PR is a last minute thing. So I know you sometimes interrupt a client meeting to say, hey, I need to do these notes because the television station is asking me. But sometimes you get called up last minute to be on PR, right? And it used to be, before the pandemic, that you had to get in your car, you had to drive to a television studio, right? It took a couple hours at least. In your case, I remember the days when you drove to New York and took a whole day from Delaware.
Yeah.
Once a couple times a month, I think, up and back. But now you can do it right from your office. Everyone being interviewed is on Zoom. So, what happens when you have a client meeting scheduled and they say, hey, we want to get you on in the middle of that client meeting? Do you cancel the client meeting? Do you cancel the interview? What do you do?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the critical part of this is you have to make yourself available to them. If you cancel your interviews or saying no, or you just want it to be absolutely perfect in your schedule, then it's just not going to work for you because it's not. So I will adjust my schedule to the PR schedule. So to that example you just gave me, I won't cancel the appointment. Right. But what I will do is, in the middle of that appointment, is I'll let them know up front in the meeting, say, look, for example, Fox Business wants my take on the CPI or what earnings came out. So I'm going to have to leave this meeting for about 5 minutes. You can watch the interview live in the front of the office if you want, and then we'll be right back. And frankly, if you think about it, you've just postured yourself
Yeah.
as a professional that someone of a high level wants your opinion.
Hmm.
And that is something that clients love it.
Yeah.
I get emails, not, I wouldn't say after every interview, but I got an email this morning after my interview saying how much they enjoyed our viewpoints and are glad that they're with our firm. So again, you're literally talking for 2 or 3 minutes. A client, if you have a good relationship with them, or even a prospect, they're not going to mind you taking a 5 to 10 minute break out of a meeting to answer to be on national TV. If anything, they'll think
Yeah.
it's pretty cool.
It's going to help your chances of converting that prospect to a client. And think about it. It's like bragging rights. They're talking, they're at a cocktail party, they're talking with their friends, and, who's my advisor? Well, he's the Edward Jones guy on the corner. And by the way, if you're watching or listening to the podcast, you're with Edward Jones. I pulled that out of the air, not for any specific reason, right? But then if you say, well, my guy's the guy who's on Fox every week. He's the one who's on TV. You've probably seen him. His name's Eddie, right? Those are bragging rights for a lot of people. So yeah, I agree. Your chances of closing a deal go up, not down, by being in that situation. So I love it. I think that's great advice. And again, it's just about being flexible with this. So other thoughts on PR? Any other words of wisdom that you'd want to share to people watching this, people listening to this podcast? Financial advisors around the country.
You have to look at it as an investment in your business is really what it is. I don't look at it as an expense. I look at it as something that I'm helping build the brand, build the company. And again, you're not going to get results overnight. You have to go into this with a longer term time horizon. But if you're good at it and you practice, and anyone can be good at it, frankly, this is something that, definitely is extremely coachable. It's not like football where if a kid can't run, catch, or anything, my hands are tied, right? There's nothing I can do with that if they don't have any athletic ability. This is something that I truly think is extremely coachable with lots of practice. And if you stick to it, it can be very, very valuable to you and your company as you're building your business. And just look at it as just one other marketing dynamic that you have. And just stay humble with it because, again, there's so many people that want to be on TV. Just make yourself available, stay humble, work your butt off, and be very direct when you talk to them. Don't feed them a bunch of BS because they'll read through it.
That's right. Now, so can you remember back to the beginning, how far into this would you say it took, into doing PR before you would say you actually got your first client from it, where they saw you, they called you from there, not where maybe it helped you close a case, but where the lead actually came in from there?
It took about 5 years, believe it or not. I did this for 5 years before I saw any direct results. Yeah. And the results weren't that great in regards to that. But where the results where I was seeing is when people would come in or referred to us, they would mention that they saw me on TV. That wasn't the reason why they called. But again, from a branding standpoint and a posturing perspective, it gave us a head up on the competition from that standpoint. So, but again, this is why I say the longer term. And now that's really the only thing that we do is share our opinions on national TV as our way of gathering new assets and acquiring new clients.
So it'd be safe to say it helped you close a sale, convert a prospect to a client, maybe as soon as the second year it helped you, although you didn't get any direct leads from television until the fifth year. Would that be an accurate way to explain it?
I would even say shorter time period than that, Dave, because what I wasn't ashamed to talk about that as part of our process when we introduced ourselves to somebody. You don't come out and say, hey, I'm on national TV, by the way, but I would reference
You don't?
our opinion.
I used to do that all the time. I don't know why you wouldn't.
Maybe that's why you didn't close the case, Dave.
I love it.
So, yeah, you use that as part of your process, right? When I would talk to prospects or prospective clients, I would share with them the opinion that we shared with the country on national TV. And then they would ask questions about it. They would be intrigued by it. And that would lead that discussion down the road in regards to what I meant by that. Yeah. So when I say immediate results took five years in regards to someone really calling right after watching us, I will tell you the impacts of being on national TV. It was less than 12 months until I saw a positive impact on the business itself, without question. And if you're in a small community, that helps as well too, because now I probably at least once every other week someone will come up to me at a restaurant or whatnot and say that, hey, it's good to see you still on TV. So that brand is working. That branding is working from a company as well as personal perspective.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I know the last 3 years you haven't done hardly anything in terms of lead generation per se. And I'm always amazed because every business in the world knows that marketing has two prongs, right? Lead generation and branding. But in our crazy business, it's always about lead generation, right? Let me do a workshop. Let me see how many butts I can get in the seats. We forget about the branding part. So at the beginning, I think what you're saying is you did more lead generation, you did adult education classes, workshops and things, and the branding probably helped your lead generation efforts. But then it got to the point at the 5 minute mark where 5 year mark, 5 minute mark, we wish, at the 5 year mark where the branding became the lead generation. Would that be maybe an accurate way to say it?
That's extremely accurate. And we did a lot of workshops, and last year we didn't do any, and this year we don't plan to do any. And frankly, selfishly, again, as someone that wants more time to spend with my family,
That's right.
I don't miss having to do a workshop till 9:30 at night. Sometimes, so it's been it's a big investment in time, but well worth it when we take a look at the progression of how you're able to really leverage that national PR and get to a point where you don't have to do those workshops. And again, putting my sales hat on, when you can say that you don't have to do workshops and the person you're competing against has to do workshops, you can spin it in that fashion as well too.
Yeah, it's amazing. We always talk, as you know, about attract, not chase, how to attract prospects. And I think branding in general is the epitome of how to attract, not chase. Because a lot of people go to workshops and things like that, and they don't know who the advisor is until they get there. But if they know who you are because of the branding efforts, that gets you off to a quick start. And for some of you listening or viewing, if you say, hey, I've got a good enough gift of gab, I look good in front of a camera, I think I could be the next Eddie. Well, then that's great. TV is a great approach. If you feel like you're decent, but you're not that good in front of a camera, then hey, doing some PR on radio isn't a bad thing either. But there are other things you can do in the PR world. It doesn't have to be these types of things, right? We know a lot of people who have their own radio show that do PR through radio show, and that's where you turn a PR technique into also a lead generation technique quicker. But also sometimes just being a published author, having your own book and so on is another form of branding. So again, lots of ways to brand. I guess the most important thing I want you as our listeners, our viewers to really focus on is that don't forget branding. It's not all about lead generation. It's not all about what could you do for me next week. It's about the long term. And right here, you just heard today from a very close friend of mine who was brave enough to take a long-term focus, and now it's paying off in spades, not just for his business, but also with quality of time with his family. So, Eddie, thank you very much for being a guest today here on the Elevated Advisor podcast. It's great talking to you as usual.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, and thanks for all of you, too, for joining us this week on the Elevated Advisor podcast. Stay tuned, and we hope you join us next week right here. I'm David Scranton, and we'll see you soon.
You have been listening to the Elevated Advisor podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your colleagues. If you would like to talk about elevating your financial firm, reach out to us at theelevatedadvisorpodcast.com. Investment advisory services offered through Sound Income Strategies, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm. Sound Income Strategies, LLC, and the Retirement Income Source, LLC are associated entities.